kids are thinking, you're coming to take my place. Hold on a minute, you're not taking my place. And that, whether we like it or not, is a competitive environment. I don't like to label players. I don't like to go, no, you can't do this. If you've got a good relationship with the parent, you've got a closer relationship with the kid. If me and you go and watch a Sunday league, there'll be probably one player there will think, well, he's all right, he is. With the Cat 1 Academy players, he'll be just an average player. I always say they've got more staff than Asda. And if you ask a player, how did you get on? They'll all think about, what did I do on the ball? Or did I assist with that pass? Oh, there's a bit of a trick there. They won't see all the other actions, because 9 times out of 10, they haven't got the ball. One of the biggest things I'll say when you scout players, this guy was selling me CR7. You know, he was telling me he runs, he scores, he does all sorts of things. And I'm thinking, wow, if he's that good, I'm wondering why he hasn't signed out elsewhere. Unbelievable. Box office, to be honest.
Carlos, how are we, mate? We good?
Yeah, really good, mate. How's things? You good?
Yeah, all good, mate. So we're back today. We're going to be talking a bit about yourself, actually, specifically as the academy coach. So a man that's
Okay.
seen a lot, experienced a lot with regards to the English system. So to start with, obviously, because I think this video is going to be very useful for young players who might be entering the system, might already be in it, parents of those kind of players. Maybe outline straight away, what your qualifications are in the clubs that you've worked at.
Yeah, done. Obviously, level 1, level 2. You've UEFA B, UEFA A, and AYA, and currently on pro license. Done obviously non-league. Also done Cat 1s, Cat 2s, and Cat 3s. My latest club was Wolves, Cat 1. I moved on to PDP now, Notts County, which is Cat 3. So it gives me probably a different sort of experience.
That's what I really like about you, is the fact that you've actually, not only you're obviously on your pro license, you're a student of the game, but in terms of what's relevant to this podcast, you've experienced a Cat 1 and you're currently in a Cat 3. So I think people will realize that they're very different places. And
Yeah,
as you're going to discuss now on
absolutely.
this
Yeah,
episode, people are going to
yeah.
actually understand that. So let's start from the very, very beginning of this. As an agent, we see it as a bit of a cattle market, if I'm honest with you. How does a young kid get scouted in the first place? What are these guys that are out there on the Sunday league pitches actually looking for in a 9, 10-year-old to bring in?
Well, they're looking for gems, and obviously, we all know it's very difficult to find them. Now, if I'm going to be really honest in terms of what they're looking for, obviously every club looks for different things. But I think if you're going to put like the golden nuggets, what we're looking for is obviously their technical ability. What do these players are good with the ball? Okay, so how they're good at passing, receiving the ball, their decision making, their tactical awareness. Physical attributes are massive. As we all know, a lot of clubs recruit based on a lot of early developers. We've got sometimes under 12-year-old kids and 11-year-old kids. Some of them are 6 foot plus. So a lot of the times, in particular, some clubs are going for these early mature players already. Which, right or wrong, I'm not here to tell you that's the right thing to do, but a lot of them do.
Is that a real thing in the academies? I think they call it Q1 bias. So kids that are born sort of start of September up to sort of December, do they get almost like a golden ticket into the system in a way, or a head start?
Do you know what? Yes and no. In my experience, what I've seen a lot of clubs investing in a lot of these boys. Some of them do really well. Okay. But I do find, if I was going to say, if someone's going to ask me in terms of, if you put like some sort of graphic from my experience anyway, I think these boys do really well initially. Because imagine when they physically, let's just say, I'll give you an example. Like 2 years ago, I had a kid in midfield, for instance, he was 6'4". So his advantage being an under 13, 14 are 6'4" versus these other boys that are 5'1". They become a lot of the times a bit lazy because they don't even need to check their shoulders. They turn and bump into kids. They move the kids out of the way. And a lot of times you find some of them adapt really well as they develop towards like playing against players that are the same physicality as them. But some of them then really find it difficult to adapt. Because all of a sudden, when they used to shove people out of the way, they're not being shoved out of the way. So they really struggle. I've seen some of them. To be honest, I've seen a lot of different stories in there. But I also seen boys that late developers, which really struggled, and now they're flourishing because they've had to adapt. They've had to obviously get other which I call the golden nuggets knowledge. How are you going to overcome that physicality disadvantage? You know what I mean? And some of them, I also seen some of them that struggle all the way through and never really kind of play at any level just because of the physicality part. Physicality is for sure a massive thing. And then obviously then you've got all the other traits, obviously what scouts look for, like obviously the mental awareness, the consistency, of which I hate to say consistency, because in YDP, I mean, are you going to get a player to play week in, week out well? It's pretty inconsistent, isn't it? So you're probably going to have peaks and troughs, really. So I guess sometimes you get players that play really well 2 games and then have really 10 games really poorly. And this is why sometimes links into trials, which sometimes trials can be very difficult, because you might have a player that got potential, come on trial, and actually doesn't do well for 8 weeks, but then obviously he has got 2 or 3 games in a locker where he does really well, and people think, oh, hold on a minute, I can see something there. So it all depends who's in a building. I've seen those kind of journeys, you know. I think when the player comes in a building, obviously he's got to have already a natural ability for something, otherwise you wouldn't be there. I mean, if a player plays for Cat 1, I mean, let's not be silly. He's got to have, or she's already got to have some sort of natural ability to be there. Otherwise, they wouldn't be there. Now, what it is some people might. I remember this, like, and I've been in several clubs where like the technical director or the head of coaching or the academy manager backs up a player. They'll go, right, okay, I like that player. I think he's got something. It might probably 3 or 4 staff or 20 staff might not see it, and then you find that then the potential that there could be a bias towards this player, right or wrong. I'm not telling you what it's right or wrong, but that sometimes can be a level of bias. Okay, in fact, in the other way around, there's also the other way around where a player might do not so well and people got a level of bias, and all of a sudden the player, I guess, seen with these sort of eyes where, because his level of criticism doesn't make sense.
I saw something recently. You talk about bias. The word bias. Obviously, football's a game of opinions, and in an academy, when you actually break it down, there's so many different people having to make decisions. And I saw something. I think it was the former academy head of the Liverpool academy, and he was also at Spurs. When Harry Kane was at Spurs, when he was a youngster, he was middle of the pack. He went and trained with the first team. They just needed someone to fill in, and he was taking shots against Brad Friedel.
And one day, I think it was Brad Friedel came in and said he finishes like Robbie Fowler, and everyone's like, "Oh, does he?" And there's suddenly a level of interest, like, "What you know, no backlift, hits the ball hard, finds corners," and it was it probably just shifted our thinking a little bit when you get feedback or someone says something like that. It's like, okay.
I mean, to be honest, I could tell you off the cuff, I could tell you, not naming any names, of course, right or, and I say, when I say this, I'll tell you right or wrong. I'm not saying I'm for or not or against. So many people said things about certain players, and some players are nowhere near now. And the other way around as well. I've heard people say, "Oh, you'll never make it," and now some of them are playing in the Premier League. And you're thinking, how? And a lot of it is to do with exactly what you just said, that bias. I think what the biggest things, it's fine to have a bias. I think it's really important. We all have our bias. Let's just say, if you was a bit like, let's say I was a midfielder. So believe it or not, I was a midfielder, and probably 20 years ago, I was very biased around midfielders. But I've done a conscious sort of effort to start looking at other positions. So now I actually work a lot with back 4s and back 3s and wingers. Although I love midfield work, but for me, that's just not so easy. But I find that now something that it's almost like swimming. You know it, you got it, you know what I mean? And then, whereas this sort of area, I had to really work because I didn't find it defending centre backs, And now I've actually done more work in. I'm not saying I'm a specialist in anything, but I feel so much comfortable here, which is, as coaches, sometimes we're very biased to go, as a midfielder, so I'll just stick to midfielder. I just speak to midfielders because I'm a midfielder, or vice versa. Like, you could be like an attacker or a goalkeeper, for instance. I've got a friend of mine who's a really good coach. He's a goalkeeper and really what he focuses on in goalkeeping. But what I said to him, I said, think about it. When you're a goalkeeper, your goal is not to concede goals. So you organize in the defense, you talking a lot. So why don't you just use that knowledge that you so need, because you play that at a good level, just use that for coaching, because that's what you're coaching them anyway. So I think that sometimes in coaching, we got to remember, although we played in those positions, can we come out of that shell and go into other positions, and that makes you grow, doesn't it? Really, I think so anyway.
Absolutely. So if we go back to, you got this kid who's been scouted for an academy. What does it look like when he turns up for that very first day? He comes through the gates of the academy. Talk me through how it actually works.
One of the things I always take a conscious sort of effort to kind of make these kids feel very welcome, because imagine you go into an environment where it's peer pressure. It's massive peer pressure. You're going in there, you know what I mean? Like, kids are thinking, hey, you're coming to take my place. Hold on a minute, you're not taking my place. And that, whether we like it or not, is a competitive environment. So it's very important for us staff to kind of like introduce these kids to the staff, make them feel welcome, introduce them to the kid, because believe it or not, like, a lot of these kids come from, I'm not saying they don't ever been in an academy, but if they've been like in grassroots, they're not used to like GPSs and strength and conditioning. They've probably seen it, but they haven't probably been expressed to that. Even the kit standards and the warm-ups and the amount of times we train, the facilities, a lot of them probably never played on those kind of, you know. And we've had a couple of lads, like I remember one of the lads came in on trial, and he's never played against Manchester United. So when he came and played at Manchester United, we played away, and then he gone in there and he's seen like all the facilities. He couldn't believe it. But all it takes sometimes 1 or 2 days, and once you're in it, you know, like, because everything is different. Like when it comes from grassroots, we've got analysis. Now, I know a lot of clubs, and this is not ever the dig on grassroots. There's some amazing work that goes on in these clubs. You know, it's hard work. Most of them are driven by parents and coaches that probably are busy at work, busy with kids, and they take their time to come and train in the rainy nights, and they don't get paid for it. Do you know what I mean? So, but you know, a lot of times we get kids from grassroots, and you know, analysis is very, you know, team talks, the amount of time we trained, in the education, the academy values, all that sort of stuff that sometimes. It kind of like they're like rabbit in headlights, you know. It's quite a lot for them, because you remember, like they get player care, they get physios. Like I'm talking about not one physio, there's loads of physios in a club, and only the scholarships, the strength and condition, the technical coaches, the chefs, the nutritionists. That's a lot to deal with as you are a young boy. You know what I mean? So I always take very care with these sort of players. Give them that extra time. Give them a bit of attention. Treat them not especially, but just give them a little. Make them feel welcome. Okay, and then obviously then it's down to them to go out there and really see what they can do. Really, but yeah, it's I mean, it's exciting times for these boys. You know, they're coming in, and some of them are like playing for their dream club.
So they come in, they have a session. You know, they're guaranteed a certain amount of time on trial.
So what you've got with the Premier League, really, what they tend to do, and not just the Premier League, that goes from Cat 1, Cat 2, Cat 3. So they get 8 weeks. Okay, now that sometimes differs. Like I say, for instance, let's say I by the way, as we talk, I'm actually dealing with some players like that. So they came in on trial, they got injured, they've been injured for 6 weeks. Sometimes you can ask for an extension. Okay, so you request another 4 weeks, so they get a fair time. So, but they've got the 8 weeks, and sometimes you get an extension, which potentially can be 12 weeks. Okay, and now the player then obviously gets reviewed. Obviously, we go down the normally. I'm not talking for every single club, of course. There are different clubs work on different sort of parameters, but most clubs, I would say, they work on a four-corner model, which is a technical, tactical, physical, and social, psychological, and the social is in there as well. So, and then we work on an ability. How does that player then develop throughout the weeks? Some clubs do it every 2 weeks. Some clubs do it, leave it for another 4 weeks, and then they never catch up with the parents. One of the biggest things I always say, a lot of coaches trying to keep away from parents. They don't want to talk to the parents. They just stick with the kids and coach the kids. And then obviously the parents can be spoke to at later day in reviews and whatever. I always love to be very close to parents, in a sense. When I say close, let them know how's things. I'm not saying I'm talking to them every single day, but I have try to have a good relationship with the parents, because ultimately, if you've got a good relationship with the parent, you've got a closer relationship with the kid. And that way, what I find is the miscommunication information doesn't happen as often, I think, anyway. I might be very, very wrong. Some of you guys out there might turn around and go, oh, bloody hell, I completely keep away from parents, the nightmare. Listen, I think there's good and bad everywhere. You know, that there's good parents, there's bad parents, is in between as well. But what I tend to do as the lead, I tend to inform the parent where they are quite regularly. So there's no shocks. There's no like, oh my God, I thought he was doing really well. You told me he was doing really well 4 weeks ago. Now you're releasing him. So I think it's really important to, in particular on trials, to keep them aware of what's going on, aware of the opportunities, so they know where they are.
Something you said there that I found quite interesting is you said you're looking at whether there's an improvement, and I never really considered that. So if say a kid comes into the building on a 8-week trial, you actually forget that they're probably going to be getting coaching and training that they've never had before. So there's probably a very strong chance they're going to massively improve in 8 weeks. So are you also looking at how they can, what their capability is to actually improve, because that will give you a measure of what they can potentially do going forwards as well?
I think it depends on age groups. I mean, there's sometimes, I mean, there's experts that say, I mean, this is massive shout, by the way. There's some experts that say whatever player you are at 16, okay, give or take, that's what you're going to be like. Does that make sense? Okay, you'll improve in a lot of different ways. But let's just say if you're technical at 16, you're not going to be very ropey at 21. Does that make sense? If you're physical at 16, chances are you're going to be physical at 21. So depends on age groups. Because like I say, if you're coaching a kid that comes on trial at under 9, there's so many things going on there, your growth, your learning. So a lot of times you can see that sort of learning really quickly, but then they'll hit some sort of ceiling. So we all have a ceiling, don't we? So what I'm looking for, it depends on age group I'm coaching. A lot of the times I'm looking for adaptation. So if they come from grassroots, to say cat 1 as an example, is such a big sort of ceiling. So I'm looking for can they adapt? Not so much improvement, because I just say in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, you might not see any. That's no improvement. It's more adapting to the environment. When you look at a player that comes from, say, Cat 1, which is we've got quite a lot at Cat 3s now, where they get released at under 15s or under 14s to Cat 3s or Cat 2s. So all of a sudden, they've already been in Cat 1s anyway. So now coming down to Cat 3s, they'll adapt really quickly. So then those ones, I find you probably can see a faster or quicker improvement, because they're already used to the academy sort of level. Does that make sense? So it's not, for them, it's just a new environment in terms of players and staff, but it's not a big shock from grassroots to Cat 1. That's a big gap, I would say.
So the kid's been in the building for the 8 weeks and it's come to the end of the trial. What's the process of the decision making? You know, is it a question of there's a number of you get around a table, you look at footage, you know, one guy's got his opinion here, the other one's got an opinion there, and they differ? Like, how does the actual final decision get made?
Yeah, so the final decision ultimately comes down to, obviously, the academy manager and the coaching, because normally you got, obviously, academy manager, assistant academy manager, head of coaching. Sometimes we have head of player as well. So sometimes head of coaching shares the job with a head of player development. Sometimes the head of coaching does that as well. So obviously between those 10 weeks, so 8 weeks to 12 weeks potentially, you would have had reviews on a technical, tactical, physical, psychological, and social corners. Would have had conversation with the parents as well as with the player. We'd have had sit down and see the status of the player as an MDT meeting. Okay, so he wouldn't be down just to the lead coach to go, right, okay, I think he's a good player, let's sign him. You wouldn't be down to that. And then ultimately, it depends where he's coming from in terms of, you know, what does it come from? A grassroots club? Does it come from another club? Is he relocating? I mean, there'll be so many things that differ. And then obviously, then it's a matter of obviously looking at what we got under in terms of, like, so let's just say it's an under 15, what we got on under 14s pathways, because you might, let's just presume that he's a right back as an example. You might have a right back on under 14s that's playing up, which potentially needs games and is really pushing. And you probably have another right back under 16s that's doing really well, that's pushing. So do we need another guy there, which then will probably delay this process here? Do you know, and by the way, this is another thing that we could be here talking about this, and I mean, that's a massive debate in football clubs, because again, it's subjective, isn't it? Because you don't know, this is the big thing, you don't know how this player, it could be potentially a right back now, he might end up being unbelievable midfielder. You just don't know. But at that time, when he comes for the trial, we think, oh, he's a right back. All of a sudden, there's Johnny here that he's a right back too, so he's blocking pathway. Yeah. So let's not sign him. right or wrong, but and I can remember we had a player came on trial as a number 9 and apparently goal scorer number 9, and then within 2 years he's playing for England as a right back. So sometimes I'm very the more I grow as a coach and the more I start understanding more and more about coaching and managing, I think I don't like to label players. I don't like to go, no, he can't do this. It's more like, for me, it's more what can he do versus what he can't do. Because we can learn things, we can adapt things, especially the way football's developing now about the mobility of tactics, of movements, stuff. I mean, if he can play, if he's a good player, he can play anywhere.
Just a quick one on this one, because I just wanted to know how this works. I'm sure this is quite rare as well. If you get a player that's brought in and then within a week or two you can see they're just clearly out of their depth and it's not happening, do you keep them on for the 8 weeks?
Yeah, I get exactly what you mean. It's early chats, isn't it? I mean, to be honest, I've had that as well. I tell you what tends to happen, and this is I know what, as we say in football, levels. What it tends to happen is some scouts sometimes they go and watch all regional leagues and everything, right? And what it tends to happen, and a lot of the times these sort of things tends to happen is those kind of players tend to be early developers. So they tend to be big boys, normally quick as well. You find our 9s in wingers. And I mean, again, this could be another one. We could talk about it for a long time. And what tends to happen is in these leagues, he's tearing you apart. He's pulling trees, literally. I mean, I had once a scout come to me and said, "Oh my God, I've got a player scored 50 goals in the regional league." Wow. I mean, you score 50 goals anywhere, you must be somehow decent, right? In fact, now it plays for the championship, for a club in the championship, which these kids' journey, unbelievable. Box office, to be honest. Talking about going through adversity. This kid is the one. In the club I was working at, we had a development center, okay? And he came in, I already had a number 9 at development center, which I was pushing to sign for the academy. And the academy manager was going, yeah, I'm not sure what he does. And this kid came along, apparently scoring 50 goals. And I put him in the development center. By the way, this development center, it's not the academy. It's basically just a shadow squad, if you like, from the academy. And the kid, don't take me wrong. I mean, this guy sold me, because this guy was selling me CR7. You know, he was telling me he runs, he scores, he does all sorts, mate. And I'm thinking, wow, if he's that good, I'm wondering why he hasn't signed out elsewhere. Is always the question, isn't it? And he came in, and don't take me wrong, he did all that, but was completely not at the level of development center. Sometimes it's the levels. Sometimes it's harder to, if you go and watch a player, let's just say if me and you go and watch a Sunday league, there'll be probably one player there we'll think, well, he's all right, he is. But if you put him like with the Cat 1 Academy players, he'll be just an average player.
Are kids in academies that are playing in academies, are they like tuned a certain way? Is it a mentality thing? Is it, I mean, obviously there's the ability side, but if this kid was really good, he was standing out, but then he comes into the academy system, or he comes into that environment and he looks like a fish out of water, you know, what are the main reasons why that would happen?
Yeah, a lot of the time, I'll tell you what it is, right? I'll give you an example. Like, listen, we all see football. We all see football. We all understand football. But when you're looking at as a probably more in-depth coach, ability and awareness, you're looking for different cues. Do you know what I mean? Like, as an example, just because I run 5K, 10K every day, that doesn't make me an Olympic runner, does it? Just because I run, what it makes me probably a fit person. That doesn't mean I'm going to go in and run the London Marathon and compete with world time record runners, is that? And I think sometimes that's what the problem is. You go on a Sunday league, you'll see a player, okay, he's okay there, but I'll give you an example, like when he passes the ball, what does he do? Because a lot of the times we only look at the actions of the player on the ball, doesn't it? Because most of the times, if you ask a player, how did you get on? They'll all think about, what did I do on the ball? Or did I assist to that pass? Oh, then a bit of a trick there. They won't see all the other actions, because 9 times out of 10, they haven't got the ball. Even though the team's got the ball, they haven't got the ball themselves. So one of the biggest things I say when you scout players, see their behaviors in warm-ups. That, for me, if I'm going to scout a player myself, I'd get there really early doors, 40 minutes warm-up. Let's have a look. What's their behaviors? How they pass the ball? How they interact with others, okay? How they then, in the dead, I call it the dead moments where where there's nothing around them. What's their behavior like? What are they actually preparing for the game? When the game starts, how they communicate. That could be verbal or non-verbal communication with players. Are they at the right tune of the game? Do they read the game well? And that's not even with the ball. That's not him or her touching the ball. That's all the other stuff happens around the game. And a lot of the times, if we start adding all these little nuggets, okay, what does it do in possession? What does it do out of possession? What does it do in transitions? What does it do when it's dead times? There's actually nothing going on. How does it communicate with others? How does it? Then all of a sudden you've got a little bit more round approach and around status of what the play is about.
When you're in the building of an academy, I presume you're always on trial in a way as well, even once you sign the forms, because you can obviously get released, and a lot of players do get released. So what's the process of releasing and retaining players and the review process? Is there quite a lot of reviews throughout a year, or what? How does it actually work?
Yeah, similar to obviously when you get, obviously, let's just say a player's in the building already. Obviously, normally most clubs do reviews 3 times a year. Obviously, some of them do a little bit more. Okay, so the process of retaining, releasing is all about, obviously, which is, I'd like to think that there's been lots of if you're going to release a player, there's obviously MDT meetings quite often about the status of the player. Okay, a lot of the meetings is about who's under, who's above, what's the player journey look like, what they're like, how they're developing, how they're getting on with the group, what a lot of clubs talk about, which is what the business end is like. Do you know what I mean? Like, so to 16, 17, 18, what does that look like? Is he gonna go PDP? Is he gonna be released? Is it, there's a lot of that going on in that towards those age groups. Now, the other age groups in a lot of clubs, obviously I can't speak for every club. Every club obviously could be similar or slightly different or very different. A lot of clubs that I've experienced, a lot of the times what they tend to do is, depending on whether and this is another factor, which I know a lot of people talk about this, before and after lockdown, if you think about that, those kind of 2 years, a lot of the times before and after, a lot of players lost a lot of journey there. In terms of, remember that year, a lot of players didn't play a lot of football. So imagine if you were in that sort of age group at 12, 13, you could potentially say that you lost. I know it's good saying we've done a lot of sessions on Zoom, and we've done a lot of sessions that were cancelled. There was a lot of less games. So there was a lot of, to a degree, if you condensed it, probably 12 months that it was lost there. And even teachers say about academical wise, really poor GCSE year. So I think a lot of that was potentially, for a lot of players, could be potentially, imagine like if you are on scholarship decisions in that time, you could have potentially been released based on not really playing a lot of games and not really developing.
On the reverse, would it have been a case that you was involved in it at that time? Would the kids have been given almost like a free pass? So because of the disruption to, like you talked about, kids that had their school disrupted.
Yeah.
In academies, would that year have almost been wiped clean because it was just so chaotic and they didn't really get a fair crack?
Some clubs have given those players probably that, that green light to go, you know what, come on, show me what you got this year. And maybe they've had a bit of another 12, well, he's never 12 months, is he? It's probably 7 months of football, really, because sometimes you think you've got another year. You actually haven't got another year, have you? Do you know what I mean? So you've got because you've got September and May, you've got to then, make a decision. So yeah, some of them probably have. Some probably have. But some clubs, listen, I've seen all sorts of approaches. Some clubs give players a lot. I mean, I remember some clubs are carrying like over 25 players in each age group. Massive amounts. It depends how the club backs you. Depends on the vision of the club. Depends what the vision of the academy is. Some academies protect small technical players. Some academies love big, strong, physical, players. Some of them a bit of a mixture. They get some big ones to protect the little ones. Our Wolves, we took the under 14s to a tournament in Norwich. And honestly, I'm not joking. Like, I mean, when I seen that team, I was thinking, we're right. Obviously, we're under 14s. Under 14s at that year, that intake were really small because 2 years prior to that, I think the club went after just technical players. So we were small side, and I'm not joking, right? We seen Norwich, Stoke, Derby, put it this way, it looked like they were all 16, 17s, and we are like we are like 13s. And I mean, we got slapped up. I mean, I'm not joking, like physically we got, and there's some games were quite close, but I mean, we got absolutely slapped up. It wasn't real. I think those kind of things sometimes for development, and if you do that, sometimes it's good because you get players adapting, trying to adapt. But then, obviously, if you've done that week in, week out, I mean, you wouldn't be. I wouldn't particularly think that is great for development. If you do, sometimes it's good to expose them, but I think, yeah, those particular teams at that time, and when I say at that time, I'm sure they still do. But then what you find is when at that age groups, remember 13, 14, 15s, that age is so like that.
Does that bio banding still exist? They look at the size and you know it doesn't matter about the age. They obviously within a certain few years, but they might put a 14-year-old up against they might play them down just because they might have been they might have developed as quicker as their age group.
Our bio banding is really, really important, and a lot of countries do, like Holland do quite a lot, Germany do quite a lot of that, Portugal began to do quite a lot of that now. I think that's really important because what you then do is you're playing with players that physically your size. So that is really, and by the way, I'm all up for the challenge. And I remember when I was in Portugal, I remember some Sporting Lisbon at that time were buying a lot of big players, was all about being big and strong, whereas Benfica in Porto, in Braga, was all about technique. So we when we used to play against these kind of clubs, oh my God! I mean, you could see the difference. Sporting Lisbon. I mean, you could see them. They're all 6 foot plus, and we were like as like 5'2" something. Do you know? It made. Do you know what? If I look back now, if I'm going to be honest with you, it's not so much the physical thing for me at that time. It was almost like I could feel some players were quite scared. Do you know what I mean? Because imagine when you're at that age, 12, 13, and now you see a great big boy. You know what I mean? Looking up and you're thinking, hold on a minute.
This is the difference between making it or not, in my opinion. And if you look at footage of Phil Foden when he was playing for Man City, under 15s, under 14s, the kid was, I mean, he's not huge now, obviously. I mean, he's strong, but he's not big in stature. But when he was 14, 15, he didn't give a damn. He was coming up against kids that were like literally twice his size, and they couldn't get the ball off him. But it was more, if you watch the footage of him, it's the mentality of him. It was like, there was no fear in how he was playing. So I completely agree with you on that. Can you tell us a bit more about the categories of academies? Because obviously I think a lot of people, especially, parents and kids online, you hear Cat 1 banded about quite a lot.
Yeah.
So what makes an academy a Cat 1 compared to, for example, a Cat 2? What are the main differences? Can you talk to us a bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to bore you to death, but obviously there is some big differences. However, it all comes down to obviously facilities and funding. Obviously, Cat 1, obviously you've got the high level standard of coaching. Obviously, you've got a lot of staff. Obviously, it's a complete Premier League game program from under 9s all the way up to 21s. They run a professional development squad, which is under 21s and the 18th Premier League team. The requirements is large full-time staff. Obviously, they've got a large, I always say they've got more staff than Asda, some of these clubs. I remember playing against, our Wolves, we used to say this. I mean, it was quite a laughable thing. Like, we played against Arsenal, and you've got literally like 10 people on the bench. There's more. I mean, this is not.
I've seen it many times.
Staff, you're thinking, oh my God, we used to bring out 2 or 3 staff. They've got like 20 staff in there. But large staff. Obviously, they've got analysis, sports science, psychologists, nutritionists, lots of indoor dome as well. That's a requirement for Cat 1. So you've got indoor dome and top training facilities, the full-time education program for scholars, and also ultimately the investment they put in. I mean, if you look at the investment they put in, is 5 to 10 million plus a year, which makes if you're actually going to be fair, it's probably very difficult for a Cat 3 to ever compete with anything like that. Then obviously the Cat 2s, the facilities are still good. Obviously some Cat 2s are brilliant. Obviously they probably just deficiency on the funding.
You've got some huge clubs that are not quite Cat 1. What's preventing them from getting into that Cat 1 category?
Obviously, I can't answer for every club because I obviously you can imagine there's so many ins and outs. A lot of the times it's facilities, and size of facilities as well. Obviously, some of them obviously they might tick all the boxes, but they might not have a dome. And I think that's a requirement. Some of them is car parking as well. Obviously, some of the guys that do this might think, "Oh, Carlos, shut up. It's not." But I do know some clubs can't get it because imagine, like, say, if you've got this facility, you've got no car parking. How they get they can recruit players regionally as well, no further than 90 minutes. But the Cat ones, they can recruit from 14. They can recruit nationally and internationally too. Obviously, Cat 2 still offer a great pathway to remember to senior football. Some of them would still say that to get to that first team is very, very difficult. But there are more than ever some boys really penetrating through boys and girls penetrating through that first team.
Would you say actually you've got a better chance of making it to the first team underneath the Cat 1 system? Because surely at the Cat 1 level, you're talking about your huge clubs, and obviously they're in a different market, when it comes to first team players. So if you've got a very talented, 17, 18-year-old and they're at a Cat 2 compared to one at a Cat 1, surely they've got a better chance of getting into the first team, no?
I think this is a massive debate. I agree, but I also say to you that I have seen both sides. I've seen players that are in Cat 1s, and because they are in Cat 1s, they go on a bench for the first team, and that is the parachute for them to play at the highest level ever. On the other side, I also seen players at Cat 2 and Cat 3 clubs where probably the football, and this is for another video, the football that gets played in this is not having a dig at any level, but think about it, the football that gets played in the Premier League versus the football that gets played in League 2 or National League is very different. I know people can say, oh yeah, they're trying to play still, but we're talking about disparity of levels. So I wouldn't be qualified enough to tell you what the right thing to do is there, because you'd have to really have someone that's studied opportunities. I think there's a couple of podcasts that have been talking about that, opportunities versus Cat 3 clubs, opportunities in the first team versus Cat 1 clubs, opportunity in the first team. I think there's a PhD guy that talks about the chances of doing that. I would like to tell you, the answer is, if you say to me, is it the chance of you make it in the first team, is it easier at lower levels to high levels? Of course, if I'm competing against the world versus competing regionally, probably competing regionally will be a lot easier. But then having said that, is whether this club that competes regionally see you as a great asset to the first team. Because a lot of the times, think about it, any gaffer that gets the job, and we all know you're 4 results away from the sack. So think about it. So you just took a job in League 2, for instance, you bottom the league, you've got to win games. Are you going to give the 16-year-old, 17-year-old a lot of time? Because this 16-year-old is not ready, he's not cooked, although he might be a hell of a talent. So a lot of the times it takes the right club, the right player, the right staff to be able to do that. And I, by the way, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, I'm just saying that a lot of the times it depends where you are, isn't it? But going back to what I said, like with Cat 2s, obviously the requirements obviously is good staffing and not as big as Cat 1s. Decent education and welfare provisions, the few total of coaching hours differ to Cat 1, so it's not as high, and the investments between 2 and 3 million, obviously that goes up and down depending on the actual size of the academy. And obviously Cat 3s are very different. Obviously, tell me about it. I mean, listen, it's brilliant. It's brilliant because what it does is it makes you probably a little bit more resourceful. Whereas before, let's just say if there's a problem, you've got the MDT, that you've got player care. Tell me about it. There's player care. There's some clubs that have got 10, 15 staff of player care. There's more player care than coaches, some clubs. Cat 3 is obviously more focused in the local area. Player development community is all about community engagement and getting the players from the local area. Competing in a Youth Alliance League. So it's obviously competing with the league, the teams around that sort of category area. Smaller staffing teams, so a lot of the times you see a lot of part-time roles, and sometimes, believe it or not, is run by a lot of part-time staff. So you can imagine, like, obviously in terms of section planning, you've got to be really on the ball with people are finishing work at 6 o'clock, rushing towards the academy, trying to do session before, communicating on the phone. What was the plan today? In terms of recruitment, it's all about, as far as I know, still is 1 hour travel. in terms of recruiting, and the investments between 500 to about $1 million. But I would say most of them will probably be way off the $1 million. It's probably around 750. What I'd like to see is more money being pumped into the Cat 3s, because a lot of the times you've got these clubs, they're doing some amazing work. I spoken the other day. I went on a CPD with some of the some of the coaches that are in Cat 3s, and there is some amazing work being done, but they're struggling because it's all down to staffing. If you haven't got the staff, it's very difficult to get those number of hours, those number of activities that like the contact time is a lot less, of course.
Carlos, amazing insight into the world of academy coaching. I think people are going to find that very, very beneficial to hear. We'll see everyone on the next one. Please make sure you like and subscribe to the channel, and you will get updated with our latest videos. So, Carlos, I'll see you very soon, mate. Take care, mate.
Cheers, mate. Take care. Top man.